Welcome to the Harmonious Family Life, how to create deep connection, transform your family, and live with confidence and grace. My name is Ulrika Bilby, and my mission is to transform families, creating harmonious family, where we all can thrive individually and together, using our strengths and unique skills. Today, I will be speaking with Lidia Zylowska. Lidia is a psychiatrist specializing in mindfulness-based training in mental health, and an author of 2 books, The Mindfulness Prescription for Adults ADHD and Mindfulness for Adults ADHD, a clinician's guide. She frequently speaks on the topic of ADHD and mindfulness, as well as working in her clinic practice. Hi, and welcome, Lidia.
Hi, Ulrika. It's very nice to see you. Thank you for having me here.
So good to see you, and thank you for taking out your valuable time to come and speak with us today on this topic. I'm very excited over this topic, talking about how we can support our mental well-being and ADHD. We were talking here a little bit before how we often talk about the child in a family setting having ADHD, but maybe not so often think about that it might be an adult as well that actually have the same challenges. So to help to decrease stress and things, it's nice to have tools. So that's why we are talking today, to talk about one of those tools. So why don't you tell us a little bit more how it works and the benefits, and a little bit of background about yourself maybe first?
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm a psychiatrist, and I specialize in mindfulness and adult ADHD. I'm currently working at the University of Minnesota. And, you know, mindfulness and ADHD have been an interest of mine for a long time. They sort of started separately. I was interested in mind-body medicine, integrative medicine, and mindfulness is very much part of that. And then separately from that, as an adult psychiatrist, during my training, I met some adult patients who had ADHD, and that was new to me. You know, this was now almost 20 years ago, and ADHD in adults was just being recognized as something that is important. You know, we used to think that children grow out of ADHD. So we did not have the understanding or the awareness that many children grow up to continue having symptoms and are adults of ADHD. You know, that was very intriguing to me. And so as I was interested in these 2 different areas, at one point it really became kind of a bit of a light bulb, and, you know, that maybe this could be combined. And together with my colleagues, that was back at UCLA, we developed a program of mindfulness training for ADHD, specifically adults as well as teens. So it's been a long way, you know, for me to think about how to combine the 2 and some of the benefits that mindfulness can truly bring to someone with ADHD.
Yeah. Yes, and it really can bring some help, because one of the problems with ADHD is concentration, and that could be a challenge. So when I heard this mindfulness and ADHD, I thought, oh, that's a contradiction. How will that work?
Yeah, you know, that's a common question I get, and especially at the beginning when we're starting this work, there was some skepticism that asking somebody who has ADHD to do mindfulness can be a challenge and kind of a setup for failure and frustration, because in mindfulness, which is you know, training derived from meditation, you are asked to sit still and to pay attention to something in the present moment. And you know, breath is one thing you can pay attention to, but there's other things like sounds, body sensations, thoughts, feelings. But basically, you have to sit still for most practices and stay focused. But when you really think about that practice, is that what you're doing is you're training the ability that's actually a challenge. So it's a bit of a, you could say, rehabilitation model. Just like exercise, you know, if you break your leg and it's a little weaker, what you do is you do exercise. So when your attention is attentional control is, is weaker with ADHD, actually training it through this mental practice of mindfulness can strengthen it.
Mm.
And help you develop more awareness and more ability to self-regulate, or to manage on your own when attention is moving away, when you're distracted, and particularly learning also to bring the attention inward and understand what's happening inward, because that's also a challenge of ADHD. Attention is often pulled elsewhere, right? You're attending to others, you're attending to things that are in the environment. And so you may not stay within your own experience long enough. You even know, how are my feelings? What are, what's going on for me? And so that has a value too, not just, learning to manage attention through mindfulness, but also moving inward, and then both having awareness, but also having some tools to manage difficult thoughts or feelings.
Mm. So then in this book that you wrote, The Mindfulness Prescription for ADHD, I just read on the back of this book, and it just caught my attention, because as we mentioned, or we talked before, that it's not maybe always that as an adult that you have it, because when you grew up, it didn't exist. As you said, it was quite new.
Right.
So it says on the back of the book, do you have trouble paying attention and staying on task, suffering from disorganization, procrastination, and forgetfulness? Have difficulty with restlessness and trouble managing strong feelings such as anger and frustration? If so, you may have attention deficit hyperactive disorder, which is then ADHD.
Yep.
And that is actually, this is the America, I guess you're talking about, estimated 8 million other adults in this country, and that's the US, which is a huge number. This tool could be amazing then, for if you grab a hold to this and see that, that what can I use and what can I do to help myself to, be more present, and maybe managing the chaos at home, for example, in a home setting.
Yeah. So, the first thing is to actually recognize that you may be an adult and a parent with ADHD, because, it hasn't been recognized in the past. So a lot of parents were growing up at a time there wasn't great awareness, especially in women. So a lot of women may not know they have ADHD. And oftentimes you don't come to think of ADHD for yourself until your child is diagnosed, because we do know that ADHD is very heritable. So if you do have ADHD, chances are your child may be having it as well. So I often see adults that come to me because their child was just evaluated for ADHD, and they start seeing, this, like they're remembering, I was just like that too. This, I see what's hard for my son or my daughter, and I can relate to that. And, that's a big aha moment for a lot of people. So the first thing is to really think about that. Is it possible that I have ADHD too, or, ADD without the hyperactivity? And, the knowing that can have ripple effects for yourself, positive ripple effects for yourself, as well as your family, as well as your children. First of all, you can get help, for yourself, and that can help with number of things that are often creating a lot of stress, not just at work, but in family home. So if an adult has ADHD and they might not know it, they may be struggling tremendously with organization, organizing their children. They may be more reactive because they may have more intense emotions that they quite don't know how to regulate down. There may be more impatient. That's part of ADHD too. They can be more easily overwhelmed by what's going on, sounds, changes in routine. All of that can kind of derail you. And then, you could be an adult who has develop some strategies for yourself. But once you're a parent, a lot of these strategies cannot be implemented. You're just too busy. You're attending to other things. And so what worked for you might not work anymore when you're a parent, right?
Yes, right. That's interesting, because you don't think that your life changed or the way that you do things change, but of course they do, because then you have to be organized for your child, not only for yourself.
Right. And, if you, and most parents know this, and this is sort of, I think, a double challenge for those parents who have ADHD, is that you sort of, pull yourself together, and you may be tired, you may be exhausted, but you still try to attend to your children, you do things for them. But there's a cost to that kind of attending to someone else that really makes you exhausted at the end of the day. If you have ADHD, that task is harder to attend, so much throughout the day, and you might not have natural breaks that your brain needs to do that. So it's easier to get overwhelmed and exhausted. And then when you're in that place, it's also easier to overreact to children, and to sort of, not manage stress well. And, so oftentimes parents would then feel bad about that, right? I overreacted. I'm supposed to be this model of a parent. I mean, we all, as parents, we all have lots of, kind of shoulds. I should be this, I should be that, my home should be this way, I should be doing this for my children. And so it's very easy to get down on yourself when you're not living up to that standard. And I see that a lot with adults with ADHD already, that they have a lot of self-criticism and shame about not meeting expectations, elsewhere, maybe at work. And, maybe they grew up with that sense, because children or teens with ADHD often have struggles too, and can get negative feedback or criticism. And so it's, that can become part of how you relate to yourself, being more critical of yourself. And there's actually some interesting research now that has looked at self-compassion, ability for self-compassion with adults with ADHD, showing that that's more impaired, or it's more difficult for adults with ADHD to have compassion for themselves. And the more ADHD symptoms you have, the harder it is to be compassionate to yourself, and the more you perceive others to be critical of you. So it's an interesting thing where mindfulness can really be helpful too, because mindfulness training has many different components and the different aspects to it, and you can train it in meditation. You can also train it in daily life as you go about your day, sort of doing these brief shifts into the present moment. And I actually feel like this second part of training has a great value for parents, and for those with ADHD, it's often an easier way too, to have these briefer moments of bringing attention to, let's say, your breath, to your body, checking in, and that can stop any cycle of like a spiral of stress, for example. But so, the mindfulness training has to do a lot with attention, and there is that training of that attentional muscle. But part of the mindfulness practice is also bringing an attitude that's non-judgmental, open, and compassionate to what you're noticing in the present moment and what you're noticing with yourself.
Yeah, and so you practice the self-compassion then. That is so hard for you.
Well, first of all, you practice the self-compassion by saying, I'm going to try to be open and non-judgmental of what's happening for me. And that by itself is a kind and compassionate thing to do. Like, I'm going to try to notice how often I'm critical of myself. And then just, that maybe I can choose a different way. Like, what if I were a little kinder to myself in this moment? So there is that, just starting to watch this judgmental thinking, and then choosing not to feed into it, and choosing to be kinder to yourself. And there's also, in addition to that, there are practices when you actually offer yourself some kindness wishes. We call it loving kindness practice, or just going through different steps of self-compassion practice that's developed by Kristen Neff, where you notice that you're suffering, and call it that. I'm having a hard time right now. I'm suffering, and I'm not the only one. So really connecting with, maybe thinking of all the other parents that might be having a hard time, and then doing something kind to yourself, offering a sense of care and compassion. So that could be like words, "It's okay, honey," like you say that to yourself, or
Ah,
you put a hand over your heart and kind of have that sense of, I'm here for myself. I'm not, I see that this is hard,
nice. Mm.
and and that can be very powerful. um, or just, some words of support. This is, you're doing your best, or it's okay, you don't have to be perfect, you know because sometimes that drives the suffering, or the judgments, or
Mm.
it. So this self-compassion can really help in the moment, and it's again through how you talk to yourself, what you do in that moment of difficulty. It can shift things. It can help you become a little bit more grounded. It can help you think of what else, what can I do differently? How can I respond differently, not just to myself, but from that self-compassion, you can attend to your children differently,
Yeah.
or to your partner, or to the situation.
And this was beautiful. But how is it then? It requires some work, always, I guess, and some discipline as well. Because if you're in this mood and things, so what is the easiest way to get to that place? Is it through breath, or is it to just stopping, or some sort of, what is the easiest way to access, to
Yeah.
get to that place that you were talking about?
Yeah, so it's a little bit like physical training, that the more you do a little bit of practice every day, the easier it is to then apply, to then sprint when a tiger is chasing you,
Yes.
right? So in a sense that if you are able to do some of that mindfulness practice every day, or at least a few times a week, in the moment of difficulty, it will be easier to apply it.
Mm.
Um, it will become actually even over time, hopefully somewhat of a habit, or more automatic, to catch yourself and say, "Oh, I am really, spinning out here. I need to focus on the present moment, focus maybe on the breath." So there are, programs. My book is one resource when it's you kind of training and exploring different ways to be mindful. And there's different, there are different practices. Breathing mindfully is one very kind of core practice, but there's also other ways of being mindful that include, movement, that include sound, that include eating, like mindful eating practice. And so a lot of, it's good. I always recommend to at least explore some of the different practices. And what people may find is that one resonates more with them than the other,
Mm.
right? And recently, to my community, I posted a question like, how do you practice mindfulness? And after having some familiarity with mindfulness, and that's where like a class or a book comes in, that you explore different ways. People sort of make it their own, and they figure out like what is the way that I can keep in my life. Um,
Yes.
so a couple examples that I thought was interesting is, somebody would do mindful practice by not jumping out of bed, which is their habit, but just
Ah.
taking a few moments to kind of acknowledge their body laying down, taking a few deeper breaths, kind of feel the morning, kind of the light, and just acknowledging the beginning of the day, and then like more slowly, more intentionally getting up.
Mm.
Uh, and so that's one way, that somebody can do it. Somebody does their mindfulness practice in the shower, because that's really when they can focus on the feeling of the warmth of the water, the sensation. And it's this sort of connecting to the five senses that helps you not be stuck in your thinking, right? You're just
Yes.
right there. And it's a nice practice. For others, it was, mindful walking in nature, because nature itself is, I think, kind of spontaneously inducing mindfulness, because, and that's why so many of us are drawn to nature, because there's colors and sounds, and you feel the air, and it takes you out of your mind of, again, this sort of, this chatter that we often are stuck in, and you can start noticing the present moment. But if you bring intentionally this awareness, oh, I'm here now, I'm noticing the colors, the smells, that can be very nice. I'm feeling my body as I'm walking. I'm noticing my breath. For some, people who do gardening can be a very mindful activity, or even exercise, whether it's dancing, whether it's, yoga is known for bringing this sort of meditative focus as well. But, I've had people saying mountain biking or, cycling is my way that I get really into the present moment, and I'm with my body, I feel my breath. And so there's just so many different ways. So there's this creative component to mindfulness, which I always encourage, because people often get scared of meditation. And they say, oh, I've tried it, I can't do it. And plus, I am so busy. How am I going to carve out even 5 minutes to do the practice? And, as much as I think carving out some time, just to at least, like saying for 4 weeks or 8 weeks, I'm going to really carve out some time so I can learn the ropes, I can learn the practices. It can be very helpful to get you jump started with this, and maybe having an app that you listen to and discover different practices. But then there's a point when it's also important to say, what is it that I do in my daily life already that I could bring mindfulness to and make it, my way?
Yeah, I like that. I was just thinking now, because of the season we're in, we're washing our hands so often. That is one thing that I was thinking when you were talking. It's an easy way. You were doing it anyway. Why not, bring our attention to actually what we're doing while we're washing our hands, and just be mindful about it.
And then using that also to just saying, let's check in. How am I feeling?
Yes.
What do I notice about my stress level? Or and maybe taking 1 or 2 deeper breaths, just to kind of bring down the level of stress or maybe tension that's there. And that can happen even with 1 or 2 breaths. So you're training awareness, and you're also helping train yourself to induce some relaxation. Because, when you're in a calmer, more relaxed place, you can think better, you can problem solve better, you can attend to others better. Like, it's so much harder when we're in this kind of tight, stressed place. And we can't help it. We get there, as a parent, your child has a difficult moment. It's very easy to react with them. And they're screaming, you start screaming. I mean, this is just, it's just human. This is what happens. So actually learning how to recognize, I'm really in this, the state right now. I need to activate some way to bring myself down, through breathing, or maybe even through feeling the bottom of my feet. Maybe it's, I'll say time out for a moment, go take a sip of water and do it very slowly and like intentionally, mindfully. That can be a way to also to activate this more mindful, more calm place.
Yes, lots of different ways we can do it, actually quite easy. It doesn't have to be so complicated as you said. You hear the word and then you think, oh, I don't have time. So thank you so much for giving us all these insights. And if people would like to find your book, or where will they find you? You have it on your website?
Yeah, my book is available on my website. It's also available on Amazon or the publisher's website. That's Shambhala Publisher. And actually, if you just wanted to check it out, on the publisher's website, Shambhala, you can just look Shambhala mindful prescription, you'll find some of the meditations that are included in the book. So people can just kind of listen to it.
Oh, and take this and test it.
And check them out. And that starts with, 5 minutes mindful breathing. And then we have, other practices that sort of are how to be present to all of it, your thoughts, your feelings, sounds, just kind of tracking your awareness a bit in the moment, and being the witness to your experience. So you're creating some space between all these reactions, all the chatter that happens inside, and having some ability to step back. And there's one practice that I always encourage people, and maybe we'll end on that, which is called stop, because you brought up the idea of stopping. So stop practice is this kind of nice reminder, because every letter reminds you of what to do to try to be more mindful.
Like that.
So S will be stop or pause, and it doesn't mean that you have to completely necessarily stop. It can help to stop completely, but even this internal stopping and slowing down, like, you can still might be talking to your children, but remind yourself, stop, I need to pause for a moment internally. And then T means take a breath, or take a few breaths, and just take few, and the deeper the breath, the more calming it can be, because when you stress, you start breathing up here. So just belly breathing, or try to do this deeper breath. And then O of stop is observe in the present moment. And that could be, I just observe, like I tune into sounds for a moment, just to give a little bit of that break from the chaos that's happening. Or I observe my breath, or I observe my body, and invite the body to soften a little bit. And then I also observe my thoughts and feelings, like, am I criticizing myself? Am I being really frustrated with the situation? And then, as you observe, you can have some space that is created from all that stress and reactivity. And then P is of the stop is for proceeding. You carry on, and then, but you have a little bit more awareness, a little bit more choice about how you're meeting that moment. So and this can be done within seconds. Once you feel like STOP, maybe put that on the fridge and say, stop, take a breath, observe, proceed. It's a nice, quick practice to explore for yourself and your family.
I like that idea. Stop. So let's all put that on our fridge. Thank you so much for being here. And we have lots to practice now and come up with lots of different ideas. So I like that. So thank you for being here today. And thank you everyone for watching. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Bye.